I give you my writer's journey, episode 2, Attack of the Critics. In episode 1, The Phantom Manuscript, I discussed growing up and my writing stories that I had. In this episode, I want to discuss my experiences and advice concerning critics and criticism. First and foremost, you must work on your weaknesses, which means you have to find out what they are and not be in denial of them. You have to seek out how to change and improve. For this, please understand perfectionism is an issue. I have struggled with perfectionism myself. If you want to produce something perfect and only release it to other people and or to the public when you feel that it's perfect, then you might never release your work because you will constantly want to revise it and change it and make it different. And in some ways, you're just changing it. You're not necessarily improving upon the product. In fact, making YouTube videos as a part of this channel has really helped me in a lot of ways to shrug off that old sense of perfectionism. Because quite frankly, I know a lot of these videos are nowhere near perfect. The sound quality is not perfect. There's so much more that I could say about the book, but I'm trying to get it down to just 5 minutes. So I say what's on my mind, I edit it, and I move on. And quite frankly, you may want to consider that in your writing journey. There may be a point at which you just want to consider a project done and you want to move on. It's interesting, there are some films, like with the Star Wars movies, where you can tell George Lucas so much wanted the story to be different that he's re released the movies as different editions over the years, changing aspects of it. There's a whole discussion that we could have about that, but that is something to consider as a writer. Technically, after you release your book, you can release an updated edition of the book. And you don't have to wait to do a 10th anniversary edition. You can just go online and put in a new edition of your book in which you put in some revisions, and that's perfectly fine. Alright, so a little more about my life, more stories to tell you. When I was in high school, I signed up to participate in speech and debate, as well as academic competitions, UIL academics, academic decathlon, and mock trial. And I'm so glad that I did, because I feel like they gave me a good sense of criticism. We would go to speech and debate tournaments probably 2 or 3 times a month for most of my high school years, and traveling out to those tournaments on the weekends. Some of them were Friday and Saturday, some of them were just Saturday tournaments. I got a lot of feedback because every time that I got up to give a speech, the judge would fill out a ballot with comments. That ballot would go to my coach. My coach would read over it and then be able to talk to me about what my strengths and weaknesses were, what the judges saw as flaws, and how that I could possibly improve. Now, if I would have just been really arrogant and thought that I was the most amazing speaker ever, then I would have ignored those comments and been like, those judges don't know what they're talking about. But I mean, realistically, you reach a point at which you have to tell yourself, yes, I'm not perfect. I have flaws. Here's what the critics believe. So every single judge, every single speech, every single round, there was some sort of feedback, usually, most of the time. Eventually, my senior year, our debate coach finally convinced us to film ourselves and watch the video of us giving speeches. That was not easy to do. It's really the best thing that you could do. And I really did regret that I waited until my last year of competition to do that, because I saw how, with my hands, if I had any sort of jewelry, rings on, or bracelets, that I would nervously touch those or play with them. I could hear the vocal fillers that I would use. That awareness allowed me to stop doing those nervous habits, to stop using the vocal fillers as much, to not touch my ring or bracelet when I was giving speeches, just because I was aware of it. I think it made a huge difference and helped me do a much better job my senior year. That kind of feedback really matters. That kind of self-awareness. When it comes to your writing, reading your writing out loud makes a huge difference. I have learned by reading it and hearing my voice say it, I find mistakes, I find issues. I realize where the rhythm and the flow of the writing just isn't going like it should. To me, I hear stilted dialogue, typos, words left out, questionable things in sentences becomes much more obvious when you're reading it aloud. And I would even challenge you, if you struggle with that, you may want to record yourself and play it back and listen to yourself reading your own writing. I personally have performed slam poetry, where I've written poetry and either memorized it or read it off the printed page at poetry competitions, at coffee houses and bars, that sort of thing. It's a whole lot of fun. It allows you to take your writing and put it in a performance level, but it also allows you to get feedback, being part of the community. You're at a coffee shop, you read your poem out loud, other people are reading theirs. It's a whole community. You get to talk with the other people. People will come up with you. They will tell you what they liked about your poem. If you ask for criticism or feedback, there are some people who will give that to you as well. You might also win some money or prizes. You never know. I also highly recommend being in writing groups where you meet with other people, you all agree to do a certain amount of writing for the week or for the month, and then you meet together, you trade your writing, you read each other's writing, and you give each other feedback. During that, most writing groups would ask the person whose writing they're discussing sits there silently, so they're not trying to defend themselves or justify it, while that everyone gives their initial thoughts and then maybe the person talks. With a writing group, you want to make sure that you have the same expectations. I remember I was once in a writing group where we had different expectations. Really, there were a couple people there who just, I think, wanted other people to pat them on the back and tell them how awesome they were and how great their story concept was and how interesting the characters were. They didn't actually want feedback on their sentences, the flow of it, the structure of it, grammar issues, punctuation, anything like that. And that's perfectly fine. That's acceptable if you have an understanding of that as a group and you know that. Because quite frankly, some people just want a community and they want support and encouragement and positivity, and that's great if you know that going in. But if you don't know that going in, you're gonna end up with conflict, and believe me, I've seen that, and it's not always fun as different people end up treating each other in different ways because of it. I've also been in writing groups where some people just didn't bring any writing, and you have to decide if that's okay. Like, are there people in the group who are just so good at reading and commenting and providing feedback that they might not necessarily be sharing writing very often or at all? There's a lot to consider in creating your writing group and discussing with each other about those kind of expectations. Similarly, I would say when you're working on your writing, you really need critique partners, and eventually when you're to the stage of having a nice draft that you have worked on, you'll need beta readers, but again, you need to talk about expectations. And some people will do critique partners or beta readers or writing groups when they've only written, a chapter or two. They haven't written the whole book. They've just written part of it. Other people want to write the entire book before they get that feedback. For me personally, I just think it's better to write the entire draft of the book first before you get feedback. And part of that is the perfectionist issue that you might have in your mind, like I have had before. And part of it is also if people get negative feedback, they might be more likely to not finish the project. And I think that's really unfortunate. Like, I would hate to give someone comments about how I don't think this character's working or that this part of the story really makes sense, and then for them to be negatively impacted by that and not finish writing. Just me personally, I like the idea that you write the whole book and then you trade it. But I know that's not what a lot of writers do. A lot of writers are very happy writing a chapter or two at a time and then trading it with other people. And that could work out. You could have someone in the group who writes the whole book, someone else who's just writing a chapter or two, and you just trade them a little bit at a time to get through it. But ultimately, my message with the criticism is, number one, you need honest feedback. So you've got to be working with people who aren't just going to be like your mom saying that she loves you and everything you do is wonderful. Number two, you need to reflect on and accept the feedback. This is where there's a lot of pushback, where a lot of writing groups fall apart, because when people get the feedback, it's not what they wanted to hear, and they have kind of a breakdown or what have you, or they're just in denial. And they come up with all these excuses to where they become defensive, or they attack you, the person giving them the feedback, which can be really unfortunate when you're just trying to help them to improve the writing. Number three, seek out how to improve your writing issue. Once you've gotten that honest feedback and you've accepted it and reflected on it, figure out there may be books or websites or YouTube videos you can watch. There may be ways that you can practice, whether it's getting lists of certain words to help you or reading model texts that you're able to use as inspiration or whatever it is that you need to do. So that number 4, ultimately, you can keep writing and continue to produce the work that you want to write because, after all, you're a writer. I could go on and on about this topic, especially because after being in high school and experiencing all those competitions, as an adult when I became a teacher, I spent the first part of my career as a speech and debate coach, UL academics coach, also academic decathlon coach, and mock trial coach. I spent years and years mentoring students, giving them advice, giving them criticism and feedback. And I have noticed over the years, a lot of people, different personalities, take it a lot of different ways. I always tried to preface any time that I was giving the feedback with something to the effect of, I am probably going to sound very negative here, but I am nitpicking and trying to help you to improve. That it's not really worth our time to just sit here and talk about all the positives. You've got a competition coming up, or you've got a deadline coming up, and your goal should be to constantly improve. All right, that's what I've got for today. Hope you enjoyed episode 2 of The Writer's Journey. Every day is a good day for a book talk. Peace.